हाँ जी, हाँ जी. Okay. Okay. July is the month to embrace the monsoon, the sunshine, fragrant soil soaked with positivity. So, fresh and beautiful morning, everyone. On behalf of IQAC of Government College for Girls, Ludhiana, I welcome Dr. Paramjeet Singh Gariwal, DDO Principal.
Jaspreet ma'am, voice is not audible.
Yes. Hello.
Yes, now it's
Okay.
audible.
Shall I start again?
Of course.
Okay. Dear friends, July is the month to embrace the monsoon, sunshine, fragrant soil, soaked with the positivity. Fresh and beautiful morning, everyone. On behalf of IQAC of Government College for Girls, Ludhiana, I welcome Dr. Paramjeet Singh Gariwal, Vice Principal Professor Rakesh Kumarji, Senior Staff Council members, and very dear faculty members. Today, we have gathered to be a part of yet another faculty development initiative. Now, I invite Dr. Preetham Kaur, Coordinator IQAC, to say a few words about this workshop.
Thank you, Dr. Jaspreet. Respected DDO Principal, Professor Paramjeet Singh Garcha ji, respected Vice Principal, Professor Dr. Rakesh Kumar ji, Senior Staff Council, my respected and dear fellow colleagues. Good morning and welcome you all in today's workshop. I welcome you, Dr. Jayanti. You know, we are feeling honored to have you with us and feeling excited to listen to your visionary and enlightened talk. My dear friends, in continuation to our teaching learning strategy series, today we are going to learn about rubric evaluation system and creating of teachers' portfolios. Before that, we have learned how to use the tools and techniques of preparing e-content and moving further to learn effectively designing of these e-contents. We have now reached to the next step, that is how to evaluate the students in a more efficient manner. There should be effective evaluation, and the effective evaluation, this helps in making the students to work hard and work efficiently for their assignments, tests, projects, etc. in a more professional, systematized and structured manner. Of course, transparency is also in this process. The students are more satisfied with this type of, evaluation. So with strategic planning and efforts, IQAC GCG Ludhiana has brought to you these series of workshops conducted by esteemed and renowned resource persons to equip us all for the coming academic session and of course the challenges it brings. With this, I would like to invite Dr. Jaspreet Kaur again to introduce our resource person of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Preetham ji. We, the faculty members, have always been judged and evaluated by the students directly or indirectly, and now we are being judged by their family members too. But we all agree to the point that fair and unbiased evaluation is a very serious task. And fair evaluation is beneficial for both the facilitator and the student. So today we have a right person at right place for us how to evaluate the students effectively. So let me take the privilege of introducing our person of the day, Dr. Jayanti Datta. Dr. Jayanti Datta is Deputy Director, UGC Human Resource Development Center, Punjab University. She has an experience of 20 years in the field of training higher education faculty. She is recipient of the Best Short Film National Award in the year 2013 for her film New Drugs for Tuberculosis, awarded by Council of Scientific and Industrial Research. She has developed e-content for educational television and has created 4 MOOCs, that is massive open online courses for Swayam portal of MHRD. What a short and crisp introduction about today's speaker. And now, in the first session, we shall be learning about how to create rubric for student evaluation. Without wasting any time, over to you, Jayanti ma'am. Jayanti ma'am can start screen sharing. Just a moment, ma'am. I'll unmute. Hush, please unmute Jayanti ma'am.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
she's.
I'm unmuted.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good morning to all of you. And it is a nice weather here in Chandigarh. And I can see so many faces, so many familiar faces. It's very nice to see because in the lockdown, we were really missing something. And what we were missing was our family members. Not our family members, but the members of our fraternity, our colleagues with whom we had tea and samosa. And it was something, and we could understand that how much we miss them and how much we actually miss the fights with them, the conflicts with them, the arguments with them. I think we have understood now the value of that. But these type of gatherings, I think it is good that we are surmounting that barrier and we are having these gatherings. And today, the 2 topics that we have decided upon, Dr. Jaspreet and me, we have discussed what are the things that we should actually talk about. And these are 2 things which we thought that even people who are staying at their homes can start working on these things. These are very simple tools which can make our teaching effective. So the first one is how to create a rubric. So creating a rubric. Okay. Can you see the screen now?
Yes.
Okay. Right. Friends, welcome to this session. Right. So please ignore the time that is given here. But the objective of the session is to share with the colleagues how to create a rubric. And after the session, the participants will be able to create their own rubrics and use them for evaluation. Before I begin the session, there are certain terms and conditions. We all know that online platforms have certain hurdles, and it is really very, it feels very surreal and very eerie to actually sit in an empty room and talk to your laptop. And nobody's there to actually tell you whether you are doing something good. Nobody is there to, we cannot see the eyes and the laughters, we cannot hear the laughter. And it seems very difficult actually to make it an effective session. So let us all together try to surmount the hurdles and keep our communications open. So I have requested the host also to keep open all the communication channels as can be opened without disturbance. And I have requested them to, and I would request all the participants to put their questions either as chat or maybe save them for later on, to steer the discussion, even to change the direction, to comment, give feedback anytime in between the session also. Don't think that this is going to make the session bumpy or it would not be more effective. I would say that making a discussion would make the session more interesting, because what I find with other people, the discussion that we are having about online things, everybody says that it is really very difficult to listen to a lecture which is a monologue and listen to it for a long time, for 45 minutes, maybe 1 hour. Sometimes people even go for 2 hours. And even adult listeners are going to sleep when they are in front of the laptop. And that is why I think Preetham ma'am was saying that everybody should have their cameras open and they should show us that they are actually attentively listening to us. But what can be done about the natural response to a boring session? Therefore, to make it a very interesting session, I would request all of you to kindly jump in anytime and to start discussing, or maybe keep your session questions later on. So friends, how do you mark answer sheets? This is my first questions. Do you feel very happy when you are marking answer sheets?
I don't think so.
Yes, please, can I listen to what you are saying? So, how do you mark your answer sheets? That was my question. Can you hear? Right. I have found that most of the people do not like this duty of marking answer sheet. And I would request you, even if you don't want to answer me now, you can just in your mind think about what are your fears about marking. Do you, if you do not enjoy, just think that why don't you enjoy copy checking? I would ask you, yes, Uttamdeep Kaur is raising hand or what? Okay, please, host will take care of all these questions and they can stop me anytime, right? So what I find is, about my own experience, I find that I was really afraid of copy checking when there were answer sheets which would come to me in bulk, or otherwise also whenever I would conduct a test in the classroom. I found that I did not like this duty of copy checking, because in the back of my mind I had this apprehension that I was not going to check fairly, that there would be some kind of biasness in my mind, and it would not be very possible to have a very fair and correct judgment, or I would check inconsistently because I would not check all the copies in one go. So sometimes I would be in a good mood, sometimes I would be having a very foul mood, and it depends that in what mood I was going to check my answer sheets. Sometimes it was also possible that I would make technical mistakes, and we also have copy showing to the students. I think now every institutions have that thing that they are showing their answer sheets to the students, and students is able to check. And even otherwise, answer sheets are not actually confidential things, and they can be, they are public things. And even under RTI, people can ask that how you have marked them. So these have to be technically correct. But if I was not able to explain to the students sometimes that how I have marked them and how I have given some people more marks, some students more marks, and some students less marks. So what is my justification? What is my logic for that? Not only that, I have also, in research and literature, we find a lot of work, a lot of discoveries on these things, that evaluation is very subjective. There was this study in which they have given one answer sheet to different people, to 10 different people, and they found that people have given me given them on that answer sheet, they have marked as low as 45 to as high as 75. That means the range of the marks that were given by different teachers was from 45 to 75, which is a huge range. You can understand that.
Yeah.
I also had one experience in which the copies that I had marked, I was called by the authorities and they said that many students have failed. You have failed many students, and how you have marked their answer sheets. So then I said that, how do you know that it is not the right evaluation that I have done? So then they said that we have actually got them evaluated, re-evaluated by some other teachers. And we found that there was a lot of difference between the marking, your evaluation and the evaluation of the other person. Then I said, and this set me into thinking that it is very right that we are subjective in our evaluation. And that subjectivity comes from different factors. It stems, it is rooted in different factors. It is rooted in not the actual evaluation on the basis of what is written in the answer sheet. And I think all of you will agree with me that there is a lot of subjectivity which creeps on. And despite our trying to be very balanced, trying to be very fair, and trying to be very consistent, these mistakes, these biases, and this subjectiveness actually creeps into our evaluation. So then I came across this tool, this teaching tool, this evaluation tool called Rubrik. It's a very simple tool, and it is actually something which is very commonsensical. It is not something very technical or something that we are not able to understand. I think that there is some fault in our education system or training system, that our teachers are not told about rubrics the first day of their starting, when they start teaching, because rubrics is a tool which helps you in evaluation, and evaluation is something which every teacher has to do willy-nilly, whether they are checking the board, the bigger answer sheets, the answer sheets of bigger examinations, or whether they are checking their own assignments in their small classes. All the time we are doing evaluations, and rubrics are helpful in other ways also. I would let you know this. Now, what is a rubric? If you go by definition, a rubric is a scoring guide which is used to evaluate some kind of a performance, product, or a project. It has three parts, which I'll come to you later. But what a project defines, it is what is expected and what will be assessed. What is expected from a student and what is going to be assessed, all this is described by the rubric. Now, before going on further, let me ask you that let us evaluate a movie. But how do you evaluate a movie? Let me ask you, how do you evaluate a movie? And what are the different factors on which we evaluate a movie? You can say, would you like to answer on chat? Shall I wait for your answer? Right. Okay. So maybe it is difficult. How do we evaluate a movie? That was my question. So you can just go to the movie and come out and say it was boring or it was very good. But what are the factors? If we break down of why did we feel bored in a movie, or why did we feel exhilarated? Why were we very happy to watch that movie? If you break down that factor into smaller factors, you would find some more sub reasons for finding a movie boring or finding a movie good. For example, there could be acting, there could be the story, there could be good music, there could be cinematography. All these things are there, which are the different aspects of a movie. So these are the performance criteria on which performance or a product or a project is evaluated. And then we can rate them. And you have all, I think all of us know that there is a rating of the movies. We rate them according to stars. We give them 5 stars or 3 stars or 2 stars or 2.5 stars. These stars are given. And then there are indicators. Indicators are actually different steps of the performance criteria, that whether the cinematography was good or average or bad. So this is the simple idea of a rubric, and this is how we have to actually start evaluating our answer sheets or our assignments. Now, I have created this tea making rubric for you to make you understand the very easy concept of, as I explained to you, the movie making rubric. If you have to make tea, what are the different aspects of making tea? We have fragrance, we have color, we have taste, and we have presentation, on the basis of which we can, if we are asking two students to make tea, then, and we are checking them, we are evaluating them, then we can evaluate them on the basis of these four aspects, which are called the criteria. And then best, good, average, or poor. These are the ratings. And in front of the fragrance, what you see in the columns under the ratings, you can find out different descriptors. We call them descriptors, right? So it can be heavenly, it can be stale. If it is poor, the fragrance is poor, the fragrance is also stale. Similarly, I hope you understand what is it. Now with this, I think with these two examples, you will be able to understand that to bring down something which is abstract, to bring down that to a quantitative level, because things which are abstract or things which are non-tangible, non-touchable, or only in our minds, we have to bring them somehow on the quantitative level so that we can quantify them, we can measure them, we can calculate them, we can put a number on them. And what is evaluation? It is putting a number on the thing which is there. For example, let me ask you a question and you can think about it in your mind. How is happiness defined? What is happiness? How is happiness defined? Or let me ask you another question. How is poverty defined? Now, poverty, which is another abstract question, we need to actually find out how to quantify it, how to put a number to it. Why do we need to know about how to bring poverty onto a quantifiable scale? We need it because we have to give some subsidies to the poor, we have to help them, we have to give them some scholarships to the poor, and that is why government has actually started a below poverty line, the concept of below poverty line. This concept of below poverty line comes from the ability of putting a quantification, putting a number. How do we know if some person is below poverty line or not? There are certain indicators which if those criteria are fulfilled, then we put them into a below poverty or above poverty. And why I'm giving these examples is because we have to bring something which is very abstract, something which is only in the mind, to something which can be quantified. Similarly, all our assignments which are there, for example, if there is a drawing of an apple, which is say a small class of class 1 or class 2, students are making a drawing of an apple. Now there are different drawings of different students. So how would you rate them? How would you put criteria on them? And how would you put descriptors on them? First of all, we would say that whether the drawing, the shape of the apple is right or not, whether it is exactly like an apple or whether it is just a round shape or whether even the round shape is also not there. In the second thing, first criteria can be the shape, second criteria can be the color, third criteria can be whether the coloring is neat or not. So there can be many descriptors which can be made. I hope I make myself clear with all these examples that yes, making a rubric is actually breaking down all our assignments into subtopics. But then if the rubric is so simple, such a simple tool, then why don't we use them? Why don't we use them more often? The answer to this is we don't use them more often because we are not actually thinking very hard. Rubrics can be used for assessing a variety of, the benefits of rubrics is that they can be used for assessing a variety of the students' work. We can assess essays on them, the literature, language things can be assessed on them. We can assess lab work, how efficient, how proficient they have become in lab work, the skills, it can be done. Even in physical education, it can be of helpful. So all the different subjects, the assignments, the assessments in different subjects can be done with the rubrics. Learning goals can be communicated very clearly. These are evidence-based and these are widely accepted. Now, the world is moving towards evidence-based. Everything that we do, all the research that we do, it is evidence-based. But we also now, everybody is asking for what is the evidence? And we have to find out whether we are actually doing things in an objective way or whether we are doing it in a subjective way and not even able to understand the subtopics of it. So rubrics can be very useful in that area, that they can be evidence-based and also that they are widely accepted throughout different institutions. Now there are benefits for teachers of creating rubrics and there are benefits for students also. First of all, the rubrics help reduce the time spent grading by allowing to a substantive description without long comments. And they identify strengths and weaknesses. There is a consistency which is there, and it reduces uncertainty and it discourages complaints about grades. So you can see that all these benefits are answers to all the fears that I used to have, and I am sure that many teachers also used to have, that there will be uncertain, there will be inconsistency, there will be complaints about grade, there will be no evidence for it. And I would spend a lot of time reading and then rereading sometimes to make sure that what the marks that I am assigning to an assessment or to an assignment are actually judged in a free and fair manner. So these are benefits to the teachers, and there are some benefits to the students also. Because if we tell them the rubrics to the students, then they are able to understand the expectations of the teachers and what are the standards. They can improve their performance, they can monitor their performance, and they can assess their performance. And in addition to that, they can recognize their strengths and weaknesses and direct their efforts accordingly. I think in the beginning, Pritam ma'am said that evaluation needs to be very transparent, and evaluation also needs to help the students. Actually, as I think all of you know, that there are two kinds of evaluation. One is the formative and another is the summative. Formative evaluation is like when you cook something, when you cook a dish and then you taste it. If there is some problem in it, if there is some less salt in it or some, then you can adjust the salt. That is formative evaluation. That means formative evaluation is given to the student during the academic year. That means when, for example, the class tests are formative evaluation, the midterm test is the formative evaluation, but summative evaluation is the final evaluation. That means when the dish has gone on the table and it has the guest is actually taking the dish, then nothing can be done about it, and that is the final evaluation. So rubrics help the students during the summative evaluation, formative evaluation. Formative evaluation is actually so that the student is able to understand their weaknesses and to work upon those weaknesses and attempt well in the final summative evaluation. I hope I am clear. The thing about online is you do not know whether you are clear or not, and there is no way to know unless the participants tell you by giving you some kind of an indication. So as I said, friends, that these two benefits to the teachers and benefits to the students are there. And as I said, the rubrics have three parts: criteria, descriptors, and the rating scale. The criteria is the aspect of performance. As we have already discussed, I have given you examples. Descriptors are the description of the characters with each dimension, and rating scale is the scale. It is a measure in which within each criterion. I would again go in detail about each. What are the steps to create a rubric? First of all, we develop this criteria, rating scale, and descriptors. Then we get feedback. We try it on a student's work, analyze the results, and then revise accordingly. These are the simple steps to create a rubric. I'll come back to it again. But before we start writing the criteria, the thing is that we have to find out what are the criteria. As I said, why don't teachers use rubrics more for their? Nobody stops you from making a rubric of your assessment. Nobody stops you from making a rubric of lab work of the students, because most of the time I get discussions go on around like how do we rate students in practicals, because what happens is most of the time there are pressures from sometimes from authorities, sometimes from parents, sometimes from friends to give more marks to some students or less marks to some students. Then what can be done in this regard? One of the way to handle this is to actually create a rubric so that everything is very transparent and clear, and then you are able to explain yourself, you are able to defend yourself, defend not only in front of the students and parents, but anywhere on any code, anywhere you go, you can be able to explain and justify what you have done. But for that, you have to actually understand what does your assessment comprise of? What is the task? Does it break down into different tasks? Can they be observed and measured? Are these tasks equally important? And how will you weigh them? It's all written on this PPT, you can see. And what are the learning objectives for this? Actually, what we have to think a lot about whatever we are teaching. Why are we teaching it? And what do we want to achieve from it? What do we want to achieve? What will be the learning objective? What will be the learning outcome of it? And what are the knowledge and skills that are required for the assessment? For example, I am sure that you all are aware of the 3 domains of education, which are knowledge, skill, and attitude. When we teach our students, one of the aspects is giving them knowledge. The second aspect is developing their skill. And the third aspect is transforming them in some attitude level. These are the 3 domains. These are the 3-pronged aim of education. Whether you are teaching chemistry, whether you are teaching mathematics or geography, all these 3 goals are there all the time. So now when we have to impart these 3 things in our classroom, our teaching is also informed by these 3 things, focus on these 3 things. And because teaching is also linked with evaluation. So all this is a seamless integration, the learning objectives as well as the teaching and then the evaluation, all these 3 are linked to each other and seamlessly integrated. When you teach students, for example, acids and bases, then what are the learning objectives? What are the objectives of your teaching? Now we have to therefore go to understand what are learning objectives. And I'm sure, I think other discussions might have taken place. I'll not take much time in discussing what are learning objectives, but simply go to it. And those teachers who have never heard of these learning objectives or or they have never encountered these questions, they can just search for Bloom's taxonomy. Bloom's taxonomy is a way which helps us in identifying the learning objectives of our teaching. So this is, I would just tell you that this is the Bloom's taxonomy pyramid, in which the learning objectives are there. Learning objectives are, first of all, in the basic is remembering. When we teach something to our students, we expect that they will remember something. For example, if I teach them the capitals of the states of India, then I expect them to remember that Delhi is the capital of India, or Chandigarh is the capital of Punjab. This I want them to remember. And then when I evaluate them, I am going to evaluate them on this basis only, that whether they remember this thing. But then in the next step comes understand. That means whether they really understand things or not. Remembering and understanding, my friends, are 2 different things. And you can, I hope you, have you seen that child, a very young child who can rattle off all kinds of information? If you, who has, I don't know, he has got some kind of a genius or some kind of a talent for it. And the child just rattles off any kind of, he can remember all the capitals of all the countries in the world. But his understanding or his knowledge is only at the lowest level, and that is at the level of remembering. He doesn't understand. He just rattles them off without understanding. So the next step is to understand. Understand means to make the concept comprehensible to the students. So when we make our students understand, then we actually check our questions would also belong to the level of understanding. The third step is to apply. And we all know that whatever you have learned, whatever theories you have learned, are functional only when you can apply them. When we learn mathematics, we go and then we go to the market, we go outside and find out that there is a real application of mathematics in the real world. Similarly, all the things that we learn, all the things which are related to our lives, we know that we can apply them in real world. So what are the applications of whatever you have learned? For example, numericals are applications of what you have learned. So when you teach them to apply things, then you actually evaluate them on application. And you give them numericals, and whether they can do the numericals, then we understand that the student has reached to this level of application. The next step is to analyze, synthesize, evaluate, and create. The final step is to create. That means you can create new things. You can generate new ideas, right? So this is the simple objectives, learning objectives. That means when you teach, you should actually teach you try to take the students from the lower level to the highest level. So with these learning objectives in front of us, you would see, just go and check what kind of question papers you make, and try to classify each question in your question paper according to these criteria. Whether you are putting questions to your students only to check their memory, to check whether how much they can remember, or whether you are checking them on how much they can apply, or how much whether they can analyze things or not, or whether they can create new things or not. So these are different levels. When you will categorize your question paper, if you categorize your question paper, you will find that most of the time the questions that we are putting is only of the remembrance level. We are only checking the memory of the students. So we can always improve our questions also, because then our learning objectives will be changed. So when we come to this, that when we break down the task into break down the main assignment or main assessment into different tasks, then we understand that what do we want our students to learn. And therefore, just remember, or I am highlighting this fact that these are learning objectives. These are not teaching objectives. There is a very vast difference between learning objective and teaching objective. Teaching objective is your objective. It is the teacher's objective. But learning objective means what you have learned, right? So learning objectives are always written from the viewpoint of the student and not from the viewpoint of the teacher. That means, as I say, my learning objective of this session is, by the end of this session, the participants will be able to create rubrics of their own. So I don't say that I will be teaching them, I will be telling them about rubric. What do I say? That the participants will be able to learn, will be able to do something. So that is the learning objective. So you have to first of all break down your assignment into smaller tasks. When we have done that, we make a list of these, group and label them and eliminate them. There can be around 10 or more criteria you can break them into, and you will find that some of them are not very critical. So you can just eliminate them and list only not more than 6 to 7. 6 to 7 are also maximum. At the maximum, you can actually break them down to 3 or 4, not more than 3 or 4 criteria. Then we come to the rating scale. You have seen rating scales. I think everybody knows what a rating scale is. Most rating scales include 3 to 5 levels. There can be different kinds. You can give them grades, for example, A, B, C, D, E. Or you can give them numbers, like for each criteria they meet, you can give them 10, 8, 6, 4, 2, or 0. These kind of grades can be given. Or if they are descriptive labels, you can give them like best, good, average, poor. These are descriptive labels. Sometimes we label, along with label, we also assign numbers to these labels. And we can also find out that whether we need to order them from lowest to highest or from highest to lowest. These are your own options. You can just do them yourself. And then we come to the descriptors for each level of the rating scale. We find, first, just think, there is an assignment, or let us say there is an essay that has to be written. And just think which a student has given you the best essay. That is an exemplary student's work. What will you think is in it? What are the things that you would hope to see in it? What will you describe? Then again, think of the other extreme. There is a student who has written a very bad essay. So what are the things that would be there? So on the basis of these ideas, you can then put them into descriptions of each criteria. That what is the expected performance, statements of the expected performance, but just remember, they should be observable and they should be measurable. It is very useful to use parallel language across the scale. Parallel language means if you write on the first column that the grammar is very good, you can write in the other columns that the grammar is average or the grammar is wrong. So this kind of, there are more mistakes. If you are focusing on mistakes, then there should be parallel language across the scale. We should also discuss the pass-fail line and decide on the pass-fail line, which is on a 6-point rubric, usually 4 points is a pass line, but it can also be, you can customize it according to your requirements, according to the requirements of your students, and exceeding that fundamental level, we can even earn 5 or 6, but otherwise on a 6-point rubric, 4 points is a pass, but that you can decide yourself. Then when we have created this rubric, it is useful, it is very good actually to test the new rubric on a few pieces of actual students' work. If you really want to find out whether your rubric is working or not, then what you are going to do is take some assignment works or take some student answer sheets and then try to test your new rubric on that assessment, that assignment. Now, if you are able to do, or if some of your colleagues are with you, then what you do is you ask your colleague, give them your rubric, and then ask them to rate the same assignment and see that how different, whether there is an inconsistency at all. If you find, then it is very easy to actually, when you compare it with other colleagues, that how other colleagues are evaluating, and if your rubric is good, then you can find that even if different people are actually marking the assessment, then it would be a consistent. The marks will not be very much extreme, but they would be very consistent. And once you have got these feedbacks, you can analyze and then revise again your rubric. Then it is very important actually to communicate your rubric to the class. Never think that you are just holding it back from the students and you will not tell what are the things on which you are going to rate them. For example, we in our orientation courses and refresher courses, usually we ask our participants to write a book review or we ask them to write a paper. So what we do is the rubric that on which they are going to be evaluated, we give them beforehand. We give them, as soon as we give the assignment, immediately with that, we give them the rubric form, so that they know that what are the expectations from them and what they should do and how much they can improve. There is no point in not telling them what are, or holding back what are the things on which we are going to evaluate them. One of the things is the students feel very confident when they have been given rubric and they start working hard on it and they feel empowered. They really feel empowered. It doesn't, you do not lose anything by giving them the rubric. And there is a feeling of transparency. There is a feeling of fairness, and an atmosphere of trust develops between the students and the teachers. And the students actually feel very enthusiastic to work on an assignment which is in their control, because they can understand if they want to. I tell my students that if you really want to improve, you can actually get good marks, because it is in your hands, not in the hands of the teacher. Because if you follow these criteria and if you can follow the descriptions of the criteria which are there for rating as A or as the best, then it is in your hands. You can always do that. So this is a great benefit of, I find that in a classroom, because evaluation is something nobody likes evaluation. Even teachers, when we are evaluated on our API scores, we really hate it. Though though we have done a lot of work, we don't like to be, nobody likes to be evaluated. But if we are told about these things and there is an atmosphere of trust, then we find it easier to work and we find confident, we find ourselves confident and enthusiastic on working. This is another thing that I wanted to show you. This is a rubric of a formal essay. Now you can see what are the criteria of it. And I would also like to tell you that there are lots of good resources on the internet. You can find them, all kinds of rubrics are there. Subject specific rubrics are also there, and people have worked on them a lot, and you will find very helpful rubrics already created. If you do not want to create your own rubric, or if you just want to borrow some other ideas, there are lots of ideas. And even if you want to create them yourself, even then it is very easy, because you can do that yourself. You can discuss with your colleagues, and discussing with colleagues and discussing with students are some of the things which will make your rubric more better and more consistent. You can see how we are evaluating an essay. The first criteria is areas of assessment and organization. Organization is strong and organized. There is a beginning, there is a middle, and there is an end. Then in the second, in which the grade is B, we can see that there is some organization. But in C, we see that there is an attempt at a beginning, a middle, and an end. But in D, we see that there is no organization and there is a lack of a beginning, a middle, or an end. Then we find that understanding, writing shows strong understanding, whether comprehension is there, whether the student is able to understand the thing or not. And we see if you have a strong understanding, you will get A. But if you have writing which shows very little understanding, then you will get a D. Word choice. If the word choice is good, the vocabulary of the student is good, and there is no word, little or no use of nouns and verbs, you will find that there are differences. Then sentence structure and mechanics. If mechanics means if there are errors or not, if very few errors are there, or if there are numerous errors, then also these will be marked. These are two extreme, and in between there are two more scales on which there are two steps on which you can be marked. So I hope it makes it very simple and understandable that how we have to create a rubric, and we have to put things. But the only thing that you can see here is just see that how all the things are objectively observed. These are quantifiable things. These can be actually counted or measured, and you can do them very easily. So these are my references, and thank you very much. This is all I wanted to say about the rubric. And if you have some questions, I think we can take questions and then break and then start with the next presentation.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I think I saw, is there any specific app for creating rubric? Anita ma'am is asking.
No, I have not checked actually, but I'm sure there will be there. I have not checked. I do not know.
Okay, because when we were working on Google Classroom and when we were creating MCQs, so there is an option. So I think that can be used to create a rubric for.
Yes.
And ma'am, Sonia ma'am, she has asked, please cite some examples of measurable behavior to make it more clear. I think
measurable behavior. Yes, I.
Yes.
For example, look, one of the things that I would, for example, when we talk of the 3 domains of education of knowledge, skill, and attitude. So knowledge is very easy to mark and quantify. Even skill is easy to quantify. For example, if you want somebody to run, or somebody to that in physical education or in sports, or even in science, if you want somebody to conduct a certain experiment, we can measure the skills. But what is difficult is to find out the attitudinal changes. First of all, I would request you to go on again on Bloom's taxonomy and then find out what are the attitudinal phases. Like I told you that the diagram, that the pyramid that I showed you, it is about the knowledge pyramid. But there are levels of skills also. And then there are levels of behavior also. So we can go to that. But I will tell you, I will give you an example, simple example. One of the attitudes that I would like to, in my student, to develop is, say, critical thinking, or let us say group discussion, how they do group discussion and how their attitude towards their colleagues or about their friends or classmates. So that can be observed in a group discussion. For example, whether they are giving time to others to speak or not, they are respecting other people or not, whether they are cutting them short, how do they deal with the women, other women fellows, class fellows or girls. And these are some of the, I think these are some of the examples, which very crude examples, which come to my mind, in which we can actually observe the attitudinal changes also. Or say, let us say, taking initiative. Taking initiative could be something which is very measurable. In a classroom, you can always tell your students that I am going to mark you or on your attitude. I think rubrics is something with which we can play with. We can always play with it. And it is not only that in your assessment that you have to use. You can always tell your students that let us all, in the beginning of the session, for example, you can tell them that I'm going to, by the end of the session, I'm going to give you testimonials. I'm sure you know what a testimonial is. A testimonial is a certificate in which a person writes good words about the students. Many of my students later on take testimonials because they have to go abroad or they have to go to some other institute. So they ask me to write a letter about them in which I tell that whether this person was hardworking or not. So if I have a rubric, I will tell them that this is the rubric and these are the things which I'm going to rate on. For example, asking questions, taking initiative, working for the community, taking responsibilities. These are some of the, I think, attitudinal or behavioral changes which can be done. So this comes to my mind immediately. Yes, anything else?
Very nice. And ma'am, another question by Sujata Verma ma'am. She is asking, are there any mistakes what we can do while using rubrics?
Using
rubrics? Yeah, maybe she wants to ask what could be the possible, mistakes while creating rubrics.
Right. Rubrics, I think because it's such a simple thing, you cannot create, you cannot actually commit mistakes. The only thing that you have to understand is, do you understand the assignment that you are giving to the students? First of all, this is my question. And many teachers would say, what kind of a foolish question is this? Because we are giving the assessment, we are giving the assignment. So it is, we know about it. But many times I have seen that teachers actually do not know what are the compositions of the assignment. What are the different, how can we analyze or what I think the better word would be to deconstruct the assignment. Can we analyze? Analyze means to cut down into shorter parts. So can we cut down the assignment into smaller things and find out, because you have to think hard. You are doing it actually. You are already doing rubric in your mind. You are not putting it formally on a paper, but we are already doing it. Then otherwise, how do we mark the assignments? How do we give assessments? We give assessment on certain things. Why do we give 10 out of 10 to a student and 5 out of 10 to another student? Because we are actually doing the assessment and we are using some kind of a criteria in our mind. But what I'm trying to ask you, what I'm in rubric, what we are going, we are from your mind, I am asking you to put it on a paper. So this is all we have to do. To not make a mistake, I think the best part is to confer with a colleague. I think here comes the importance of colleagueship, because I think colleagueship is something which is not much discussed in our colleges or even higher education system, because all the time we crib about having bad colleagues or not colleagues.
That's right.
I think colleagues are very important people around us, because they help us in our professionalization, and we can mutually go on to this path and make it a very enjoyable and happy path. So the best thing I would like you to do, because whenever I do something, I ask so many people, I move around and I go to people and I ask them to give me what is wrong in this. And there is nothing to feel shy about it, and there is nothing to feel little about it, because the more they will tell me about my mistake, the more better my rubric would become. So
Yes.
sometimes things slip out of your
Yes.
mind, but there is nothing much in it. The best thing I like about rubric is it is a very simple tool. And again, you can, the more you practice, the better you become. This is another thing. And therefore I would say, don't make it only a college tool. Take it at your home also. Give it to your children also. And make rubrics for everything that you do. Ask your children to make rubrics of things that they do. Actually, rubrics, what is the practice? The practice is a habit of mind which helps you in analyzing the task that you are doing. So when you analyze a task and then you can focus on each part of the task, then your task becomes better. When you understand that in a making tea, it is not only important to just make a tea like any just like that, but the importance is that I have to check it fragrant. But you have to have a conscious understanding of this, that even presentation is good, but it has to be good. But then again, you have to be voluntarily and intentionally do it, and volunteer for having a better thing. So if we play with rubrics, I think then we will become better.
And ma'am, can we take help of our students also, because then there will be more satisfaction?
Right. I think all the students' feedback is all the time better, because they are actually the people who are going to be served the dish that you are making. Whatever you are making, it is the students who are the consumers. So it is, and I think teachers should be more open. All the time we find that teachers have this arrogance of not that what two students know, they don't know anything, they don't come to the classes, they don't intend to learn. But it is not like that. I think if we involve students, their involvement would be there, they would be in a loop. And as I said, they feel very empowered. And one of the things that our participants like in our orientation courses is that we keep the participants in a loop. All the things that we are doing, whether we are inviting the resource person, whether they are not coming or whether they are coming, or what is the background story, we always tell our participants. Because then and most of I have seen many other places, what they do is they don't even tell the participants what the next session would be. So they don't even know who's the next resource person. So it feels really scary. It is very threatening to not know and not to be in control. And if we ask them for, you tell me on how I should assess you. And that is why we feel so bad about API. Though when the API was implemented, I think they have asked us, actually, what should we have done? We should have done our own research, and we should have told people that, look, I am a person from physical education, so you should rate me on these criteria. I am from mathematics, so you should rate me on this criteria. I am from music, because one size doesn't fit all. So this thing we have not done, and that is why all this splitting. So I think it is a good idea, very good idea, to actually involve students into creating.
Actually, collaborative learning.
Yeah, ma'am, just a moment.
Yes.
One more question that came to my mind. Ma'am, you were mentioning about some ready sources for the rubrics. Because if we wish not to create a new one, can we use the already existing rubrics? So can you give us some names of the resources?
There are many. I think if you just put how to make a rubric in, say, geography, or in this, you will find lakhs of it. There are unlimited resources, and you can find out. I think it's a very great idea, this internet, that because it's very humbling also. It makes you humble, and you can understand how many people have worked before us. We are just being initiated into it, and people have already worked on it. So there are already ready materials, resources available. There are tutorials available. There are and better than my online session. I think you should have gone through there and find out that there are beautiful things that are there, and we can always learn from it.
Only that close connect has to be there, no? That's why we have.
What I find is that you have to modify things. Whatever we find on the net, just taking it like that, it might not. Maybe something which is more useful in GCG Ludhiana will not be useful, say, in Maharashtra. So that can also be something that you have to modify the thing according to your own requirements. And rubric is nothing which the authorities have asked us to do. It is not a technical thing. So you are free to do how you can use it.
Ma'am, I think rubrics we have been using for our welcome and Thanksgiving functions where we were choosing Miss GCG. So there was a kind of
Yeah,
rubric which was given to us, and we were rating all the participants on the basis of different
right.
criteria.
Yes, yes. I also suggest sometimes like there are declamation contests.
Yes.
Right. So when I go, sometimes they ask me for judging the declamation contest. So I find that every judge is doing it in a different manner. So if we have some kind of, because declamations are very easy to actually make rubric of, whether communication is there, confidence is there or not, the message is clear or not. So you can always make rubrics. You are very right, I think. And there is another kind of rubric that reminds me, it is a checklist. Checklist is like what are the things that you wanted, and you just have to check the tick box. You have to check whether this is given or not, that is given. For example, if you are to check a book review, whether it's written proper or not, then we have a checklist. For example, whether the introduction whether the author has been introduced properly or not. Yes, then checklist, and no, then it is not there, right? Then whether there is a critical evaluation of there is a historical representation or yes, no. So there can be a checklist also. Checklist also is a simple kind of rubric. It is a simple rubric. So there are immense possibilities. The thing is that it is only a 1 hour session, and it is only an initiation into things. I just want to introduce you to this concept, and just a little, not even jargon. This is not even jargon. This is very simple thing. This is very common sense thing. It is based on all common sense and logic, and it is very doable thing. So when you are at home, when you are free from your daily this thing grind, then what you do is think of your assignments that you are giving to the students, and then think of how you can break them into. I'm sure that even Google Classrooms and Google Meet, etc., there must be something. Though I'm sorry that it didn't cross my mind. I have not explored it. I would do it next time. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think we don't have any more questions. So now it is the time to go for a short and crisp tea break, so that we do not fall asleep. So only 10 minutes, dear friends, and we have to. You need not log out, and then we'll meet sharp at 11:20. 11:20.
12.
Sorry, 12. 12:15 already, ma'am. 12:20. How much?
Let us make it 12:30.
12:30.
Yes. Okay. 12. Okay, exactly at 12:30.
12:30.
Okay. See you, everyone. Just grab a cup of tea.
Please don't log out.
Yes, please don't. Thank you.
And I would also request everybody to give in their feedback, whether in chat, whether later on to the GCG. So please give me your feedback all the time.
Yes, definitely, ma'am.
Ma'am, you are already getting excellent reviews.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, ma'am. See you at 12:30.
Harsh, I think we can pause the live streaming and recording. Harsh, ਜਦੋਂ ਹੋ ਜਾਏਗਾ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਦੱਸਣਾ, I'll start.